I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 6:06. I would love someone to make a motion to review and accept the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Derek. Is there anything we need to add or subtract?
I've got three things.
Yep.
Elections, BSBA meeting, which I think will fall under that thing, and consent agenda, I've got a question.
Okay, so consent agenda, when we get to the consent agenda, you need to tell me what you want to pull off.
Okay,
And then we'll talk about VSBA at the very end. If it's not already on here. And what was the other one?
elections.
Elections, which I know is on here, so we will talk about that at that time. Because that's under recruitment. Okay. Okay, hi Barbara. Okay, so, all of those that accept the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. Okay, I have not heard from anybody, so, we're gonna keep moving. Consent agenda, Bill.
Okay,
No, you have to
Take it off first.
Yes. What are we taking off, so that we can talk about it?
policies for action, item E.
E, okay. Anybody else wanna take anything off?
Yeah, I'd like to pull the, item E.
Okay, which he's already talked
Oh,
about.
E, I thought, sorry, I thought you said B's.
Nope, that's okay. Okay, so now can I get someone to make a motion for the consent agenda for all items except for E?
So moved. Second?
Second, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we have a consent agenda passed, thank you. RNESU policies for action, let's take them separately. The first one is IGBAA, Special Ed Excess Costs and Related Services for Non-Resident and Tuition Students. Can someone make a motion so that then we can talk about it, please?
So move.
Okay, and a second to Eric's motion?
Second.
Great, thank you, okay. Was that the one you had questions on?
Yes, I just wanted to have an explanation. Basically, it's moving decisions of the local district to the state, and that gets my attention first off. And what was the reasoning for that? It may be very logical and sensible, and it may be a nightmare that we don't want, but just some background here.
The simple reason is that our attorney, Dina Atwood, asked us to rescind it. She said that it's in law, and it's actually, she found it troublesome that it was actually a policy itself. In particular, she also felt that it had areas around the tuition piece for non-resident students that concerned her because potentially, I believe the way it's written, we actually can't ask the parent to pay tuition. That's actually, she said, not legal. And so she started by correcting the policy, and then she said, please just remove it. It is law.
So we lose some autonomy, but some of it might not be so bad to lose. But then we're left to the tender mercies of the state.
The state would supersede it anyway. Becky's online.
Other questions?
No.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this policy? So
That was my question.
Do we need to act on that and?
So all we have to do is, the act that we need to do is to rescind it. So that's what Eric's motion was, is to actually rescind this based on our attorney's,
Recommendation.
thank you, there's the word I was looking for.
And it actually is an RNESU policy, and our practice is RNESU starts the process. They send it to the member boards for any input on the process, and then RNESU finalizes the rescinding,
So we're just in that stage now of.
getting input.
Mhm.
So in other words, if you didn't want to rescind it, RNESU is not bound by your decision.
True.
but they'd have to hear you.
We would take it back and tell them that you didn't approve of it, but they would have the final say.
That's why it's on consent agenda. Policies that are specific to this board don't go on consent agenda because they're action items.
Okay?
I'm ready.
Okay, wasn't sure. Everybody else ready? Okay, all of those in favor of rescinding policy IGBAA, special ed, excess cost and related services for non-resident tuition students, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, perfect. Second policy is policy DSE. It's special education policy, and it is a new policy to be adopted. Does someone want to make the motion so that we can talk about it? Please?
Yeah, I'll move that we adopt the new policy.
Okay.
DSE.
Second? Greg is seconding it. Question?
Can I comment on this one?
Sure.
So everything I just told you on the other policy is exactly the opposite in this one. No, where were you? You're supposed to speak up. I don't agree with this policy, but we're mandated to pass it. What I don't have any problem with what the policy says. It says nothing. But, but the state is requiring us to pass this policy. What's in blue and crossed out, I did ask Dina Atwood to look at it, even though it is a VSBA model policy, and she recommends the removal of what's in there because she feels the model policy goes further than it needs to go. And this is all about our special education audit, but the fact is, if we follow the law, we should be fine. There shouldn't be a policy. That being said, I'm asking you to approve it so we don't get dinged on our special ed audit. But it's the opposite story of what I just said to you. Sometimes that happens.
It's particularly vague in terms of its content.
It's unnecessary.
Do you know the reasons, my question, if I'm not interrupting Bill, was particularly about the first deletion here. Do you know why she wanted to remove the least restrictive environment?
Because if we're already meeting the needs of students with disabilities as defined in federal and state law and regulations, and providing a free and appropriate public education, that last phrase is redundant. Because the law says that we have
Right.
to provide services in the least restrictive environment that's direct wording from the law.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I'm going to vote no, just because, it's not because I like to make Dean's life more difficult, but because the whole idea that we are supposed to mandatorily adopt voluntary policies is repugnant. And I don't think we should play the state's game, so I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so we're ready to vote? All of those in favor of policy DSE, special education policy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
They,
Okay, it passes. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to move on to our next item, which is Global Ends Monitoring, where we are here tonight with Mr. Avery and Brian Crane, who are going to go over the OVUHS progress on portrait of a graduate and its proficiencies.
Welcome, Brian and Jim.
Oh, Brian.
Brian's online, and
Brian.
when he was asked 5 days ago if he could pull together a presentation, he said, "I've just been waiting for you to ask me for this." So he has an overview. What does that say? Can you? Oh,
Muted.
yeah, I bet I could unmute you. Fine.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. Would you like me to get started, G?
Yes. So the screen is yours, and
Okay.
thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Let me just take a moment to share this. And perfect. And okay. Good evening, everybody, and it's my pleasure to be here because this work is so important, and we worked really hard on it last year, and this is such a, in my opinion, in terms of the proficiency work, such a big ticket item. And the first thing I want to do is give Jim Avery and Jeff Lawrence and Christine Everts a lot of credit for meeting with me weekly and hashing this out and talking about the direction, and also the leadership team, the department chairs, and the middle school team leaders who also put a lot of work into the 4 phases of this. And then at the end, we presented it to the faculty, and they gave us feedback. So there has been already a lot of work in this, in the first draft, and everybody has given a lot of contribution. And I see myself as more of a guide in all of this. I don't want to come in and tell folks what to do, because that's not an ideal way necessarily to make a profound change, or change that is going to make a difference. Perhaps after I am gone, I want my role in this to be one that is long-lasting and impactful. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say to everybody. When I came into our NESU last year, one of the first things I wanted to do was just assess, try to figure out the needs, figure out what has been previously done before me by my predecessors, and try to figure out how can we, what do we need to do, and how can we use a specific goal or a product to bring us together to try to move the work forward. And I saw right away that we didn't really have a portrait of a graduate. We had something from 2006, which was called Learning Expectations, which would be, I would call, a predecessor of a portrait of a graduate. But it referenced the vital results were, that was about 2 or 3 years into my teaching, so I'm well familiar with the vital results. And it needed to be updated, so we were able to not only build the leadership team to have a successful product, but also do something that is desperately
Recording in progress.
So my goal tonight is to talk about it with you, and to bring some clarity about the work, and what does this mean for all stakeholders, students and parents and community members, board members. What does this mean? Because this is an impactful piece of work, and it's important for us to understand. In a lot of this proficiency-based learning work, once we understand what it is and how we define it and what it's going to do, usually folks are okay with it. Where folks have some issues with proficiency-based learning is often misunderstandings, or we're not using it in a productive way. So I'm hoping to bring some clarity for you, and to let you know where the work is going as well. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done on this. All right. So what is, and I'll go through the slides, and I was asked to keep, I'll try not to talk too much. I was asked to keep this relatively short. I could talk for a long time about this, but if at the end you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. If what I say doesn't answer your question first. So first off, what is a portrait of a graduate? Well, a portrait of a graduate, if you type it into Google, and you'll see a bunch of them all over Vermont. And it pops up. It'll be a visual representation. So it's like an infographic that is on steroids, I guess is the best way to put it. It's a visual representation of all of the essential skills and that define teaching and learning at what I call a learning institution. I like to think of this school as a learning institution, because everybody is learning, the students and the parents. I know as a parent, I'm learning new things every day, and as a teacher, I am dedicated to lifelong learning. The other thing about a portrait of a graduate is it's memorable, and it's also aspirational. This document describes what we want our graduates to be, and this kind of goes into the next slide about why it's important. This describes what kind of people, citizens, are we graduating into our community? What are they able to do? Do they have the skills to be successful in the 21st century world in terms of career or college? We want them to have the skills that are necessary, the skills that employers are asking for. It's not only about content anymore, it's about those other pieces, this is as well. I'll go on to the next slide here. And I've kind of already talked about why is it important to the work. It's aspirational, I've mentioned that, and it's a commitment to the design of the school. So it really is, and it's also, I say, a public statement. This is something that goes on our website. So if a potential community member is interested in moving into the community, then they can go onto the site and they can see exactly what our aspirations are, and hopefully make a decision saying, hey, this learning institution is a good fit for us, we're going to buy in the community. And that's one component of it. It is also for those of us working and leading and teaching in this learning institution, it's I call it the North Star. It's a map. It helps us make decisions about programming, about how we're running our classrooms, about curriculum decisions, about events and all of these and flexible pathways, and it just helps us stay focused on what we have all agreed upon is important. And it's a valuable document because I feel like a lot of what happens is when we don't have this clarity and this focus, often, I personally sometimes feel like I'm flopping around, and I get frustrated, and that to be honest has a negative impact on teaching, learning, and culture. When we have set goals and we achieve those goals, we feel good about our colleagues and our students, and it adds to culture, to positive culture. It makes it a huge difference in all aspects, of my opinion, of the school. And like I said, direction and clarity for all stakeholders. So eventually, and I will talk about this, is the work to be done. The first year, and we were in a hybrid last year, and it was difficult, but we persevered, and we put a whole lot of work in this, but there's more work to go. And that work includes bringing it to more stakeholders. And I'll move into the next slide. Before I talk about the work to be done, what does it look like? It can be whatever you would like it to be. However, we kind of decided at the beginning that we wanted it to not stray too far from the 2006 Learning Expectations document, to have that consistency, because a lot of folks had worked on that in 2006. And I do want to honor the work that has been done, but I consider this iterative, which means that was the first iteration. Now we're moving on to the next iteration because our world has changed since 2006. There's a whole new set of standards. There's proficiency-based learning models. There's lots of things that have happened since then, and we need to update it and move into the next iteration. But most commonly, if you Google it and you find out more information about it, there are usually 4 to 6 broad categories with limited criteria. The grain size is very large, so there's not, the detail doesn't, because it all has to fit on one page, right? So the detail it doesn't go into small grain sizes or an expensive amount of detail. These are much bigger grain size items. But usually there's 4 to 6, and it has the criteria for that. Like I said, Hartford has a really nice one. CBU has a really nice one. And in this slideshow, if we share it out, I put some of the exemplars. The state of Vermont has one, actually, that I put here, that has 6 categories. The draft that we are working on right now has 4 categories from the original. And those 4 categories are communication, problem solving, personal development, and civic responsibility. Those were that was straight from the 2006 document that was all agreed upon. So we kept those 4 categories. And to be honest, I think less is often more. I think if you have too much on there, it loses its focus and its impact. And I really did like the 4. I thought it was. I think that was a very good thing to do. So what work has been done? So just going back to last year, I've told you about. We used some of that Wednesday time. We met as the department chairs, the admins, myself, as well as the middle school team leaders. We brought them in because we wanted the middle school voice to be heard on this. And we worked through kind of 4 different phases. And in those phases, we did some different things. Like we looked at some of the other portraits that had been done. We divided out into committees, into specific of the 4 categories, and did some independent work and came back. But by the end, in the 4th phase, I ran a consensus where I said everybody has to give this, we all have to have consensus on this. If one member, one department chair, most of the team leader, admin, doesn't agree to this, then we have to figure out what do we need to do in order to get that person on board with it. Because something like this, you can't do that with everything, or you might not get anywhere. But for something like this, if one person isn't on board, it's going to be very difficult. But at the end of it, we worked through it, and we did have consensus. And then at the end of the year, we brought it to the staff, and the staff were very positive, and some of them maybe said, "What are we waiting for? We've been, this is something we would want." So it wasn't quite ready for the summer to be rolled out, for this year. But I feel like we could get pretty far and roll it out next year, depending on what you all think, Gene, and what leadership says. What work remains? So this year, so we all agreed at the end of last year that some of the next steps was that I would bring this to student council and get some student voice on this. Go over it with them. Student council has just been formed, so I haven't done that yet, but it is as soon as humanly possible, I will bring it to them, because there might be a couple of different times we need to look at it. We'd like to hear the student voice. If that can't happen, then perhaps have a focus group, but I want to get some students on board with this. And we need a visual. The draft right now it's sitting in a document, and it's heading, and it's the criteria. It's not anything that's visually appealing right now. But I would love that to be student work. I would love that to be someone creating and designing that to add to the buy-in of this. Because at the end of the day, the buy-in, I think, is really, really important. I would not want this hugely important piece of work to be lost in a drive somewhere and not have an impact on future teaching and learning in the direction of the school. And finally, making a plan. I don't have a plan for this yet, but how do we engage families and community on this as well? That's something that I think we need to talk about and to flesh out a little bit more. I do have some ideas on that, but I would like to get, clearly not consensus, but feedback if possible. Folks could chime in. We figure out just a safe and easy way to engage community members on that. I would really like to do that. And then, hopefully by next year, we can all be in some kind of agreement that this is really important. This is going to drive the proficiency work. This is going to drive the SEL work and all the other work that's being done. Just to note that things are going a little bit slower this year. As you all have been hearing, their stress is very high. There's staffing and COVID and behavior. There's lots of things going on. It's slowed down, but we haven't lost sight of this because even throughout some of these difficulties, this is something that we can hold on and be proud of, and can really contribute to positive culture. But just to be honest, the work has slowed down a little bit, but it has not stopped. And everybody, and Jim and Jack and Christine are fully behind it, and we are working through it. So that's I talked really, really fast. I put some resources in here. The original document and the draft is, I'm sure you can see it. I'm happy to come back with you and talk with you another time about it. But I'll put it out there. Are there any clarifying questions, any probing questions, anything about this work as up to this point?
Barbara.
Could you repeat the 4 categories? Communication was one of them.
Yep, sure. The 4 categories, and this is directly off the 2006 document, is communication, problem solving, personal development, and civic responsibility.
Thank you.
I did not bring the draft with me tonight because that's getting into the weeds a little bit, and I wanted to give a brief overview. That's why I didn't bring the actual draft with me.
Thank you.
So I guess I have a question in the form of a probing question. I'm looking at the Vermont Portrait of a Graduate. I don't know how closely that correlates to what we've been talking about. It was up on the screen earlier, so I Googled it. And this is something that we also have in our, I can't think of a proper term, our self-definition, that's close enough. Anyway, it's global citizenship. And in the Vermont Portrait of a Graduate, it says, students recognize that our world is increasingly complex and interdependent. Students understand and exercise their rights and responsibility within a democratic society. Students study a non-native language and understand the importance of learning about other cultures. I don't really like that label, and here's why. There's no such thing as a global citizen, and we certainly don't want to say that all citizenship on the globe is equal and equally good. I don't think we want our students prepared to be citizens of Russia or North Korea or failed states or any kind of dictatorial place. We have an incredibly proud heritage in Vermont of town meeting and of a system that was the pride of the world in the 19th century because our ordinary citizens were prepared to act as citizens, as legislators, as people informed about events. That was very unusual. And Vermont really was a model for the rest of the world in that sense, and I think we need to emphasize that. Going before the Student Council and saying, do you guys want to be global citizens? Everybody's going to say yes. They haven't really thought about it. It's a vague term. It sounds nice. But I think we need to teach kids what it means to be a citizen of a particular place at a particular time, and that's Vermont now. And I'm going to give one glaring example. We've had a discussion, I think it was the first meeting this year, about children wearing Confederate flags to school. I'd remind the board that you rejected my attempt to institute teaching about the Confederate flag as part of a curriculum for the teachers, which was, I think, a mistake. But one of the things going on with wearing a Confederate flag is a profound misunderstanding of what their heritage as Vermonters is and should be. Profound misunderstanding of their own history. And I don't think we're going to get to that kind of level of knowledge and interpretation and analysis unless we teach children about their particular citizenship and particular heritage. And I'm not seeing that here, and I wish I were.
So thank you for that. Just so you know, global citizen, the Vermont Portrait of a Graduate is not, it's not word for word in the draft that we are working on. My opinion is that we create something that, as kind of you were alluding to, a local community, and I think that is the local community is important, obviously, and we want this Portrait of a Graduate to reflect our local community and whatnot. But I'm not going to get into the weeds about what our draft. It is not the Vermont Portrait. I think that most schools have made the decision not to just adopt the Vermont Portrait of a Graduate, to create their own that represents the values of their community and whatnot. I'm not going to dive into what we've outlined in civic responsibility. I can come back another time and talk about the civic responsibility criteria on the portrait. But it is, I can tell you right now that the Vermont is not, it's not just a copy and paste. It is from the ground up, and all admin, all the leadership team has been through it.
Okay, I look forward to the results. Thank you.
I was listening to this and was wanting more specificity. Communication, problem solving, civic responsibility, personal development are broad general categories at which we can define anything and fit them into those four categories. And if we're not really discriminating and saying this is in and this is out, then I don't know what we really got. kudos for having a lot of input from every kind of group that was around, but at the same time, when you're this general and this vague, I'm not sure we've got an agreement on anything. You follow?
Yeah, and Bill, I understand. It's just naming the categories is very vague for you all. And one of the things that was the hardest is to wordsmith and to balance specificity and aspiration. And when you see the criteria, I think it will make more sense to you. That it's not as, it's still fairly broad. The grain size is pretty big, but under communication. And there were the English department was absolutely a part of that. You know that there's some serious communication criteria in there. And I think that will be, when you do see it, that'll be illuminating.
When will we be able to see it?
So I'll leave that up to Jean. When you want me to come back, we'll
To your
chat.
work plan.
You can
You
she'll
can
let me know.
revisit your work plan.
I'd like to start
I
with
see
something
that.
that's written.
Okay. So Natalie's here?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted Charlene to know.
Oh, but Natalie also has a question. Do you mind unmuting her? Please.
Okay.
Hi, Brian. I think this is really great work and really important work. I understand the 4 categories come from 2006 document. So my concern is that at that time, we weren't as focused on mental health and well-being. And I just want to make sure that there is a higher focus on that this time around.
Yeah, we can. When we looked at it last year, I think we did have that in the back of our minds. When we look at it, I don't want to say we're going to go and make a lot of changes to it now, but if there are, I do want to say that this is iterative, as I mentioned before. So if there is a desperate need for mental health work in that portrait form, it is iterative. I don't know the process to make a change to it right now, but there are, under personal development, I know there is criteria surrounding self-care and exploration, and some of those things that are really important for mental health.
And that's great. I just want to add, I work at the college, and we're seeing students at that level mentally not prepared. We had a student suicide 2 weeks ago. Mental health really is at the forefront right now, and I think that it's something that we can't ignore. That our students need to start sooner, preparing themselves for college mentally, physically, everything, not just academically. The portrait develops that foundations, and we need to make sure that we don't lose that focus.
I absolutely agree. And within this portrait of a graduate, there are social and emotional learning components, transferable skill components, and content components. So, and it's just a focus. It doesn't mean other things can't happen in the building. That's not what this is. But this is our North Star, and it just helps guide us.
Great. Natalie, are you all set? Okay. Other questions for Brian?
I want to second what Natalie said, that I think particularly in the light of the last 2 years, that it's been very difficult for kids, probably more than adults tend to realize, that to have your social development interrupted for such a long period of time, I think was very hard, and when kids get to college, it's tough for them. So I agree.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Brian, for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We look forward to seeing another,
Iteration.
that's the word I'm looking for. Apparently, Jean has all my words tonight.
Yep, I've helped you out here.
Awesome. All right, then we are going to move on. And thank you again, Brian, for being here. And Jim, thank you for being here as well. Let's see, monitoring report 2.2, treatment of staff. Which should be in your packet. This is a reiteration from last year. We've seen it one time before last year. Any major changes to it that you might want to speak to?
No, not particularly. Obviously, the master agreement was updated. And the COVID recovering plan and protocols, but the interpretations haven't changed.
Okay. So can I get someone to make the motion to accept policy 2.2 treatment of staff, please, so that we can discuss?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Any questions for Jean? Okay? Anybody up there? No? I noted that you reported compliance and everything. We haven't heard from staff, so I assume that you must be doing okay. So.
Well, one of the characteristics, or one of the pieces of evidence, is the lack of grievances thus far. And another, I think, piece of evidence is the memorandums of understanding that you're receiving this year, which indicates that I'm working closely with the faculty on the changing work conditions under COVID. That's not to say that there are not staff who are unhappy, because there are. It is a very stressful year. But we are attempting to treat staff with fairness and respect in all ways, and recognize the stress that they are under.
We appreciate that. I'm sure they do as well. Okay, I'm not hearing anything from anybody, so if you're ready to vote, all those in favor of policy 2.2 and accepting it, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, treatment of staff passes. Thank you. Okay, board management delegation. So we're going back to the one that we looked at last month that you guys had questions on as far as the name, which was accountability of the superintendent. And after our meeting, I looked at this a little bit more, and I realized that when we're talking about the accountability of the superintendent, RNESU is the one who actually does her contract. And so,
Want me to help out again?
yeah, I'm gonna try it on my own, and if I get bogged down, I'll accept you to pull me forward. So when we're looking at the accountability of the superintendent, RNESU is the one who makes sure that that's being done through policies, through monitoring reports, through talking with both boards, through talking. So when it comes to this board, OVUU, and talking about how we are accountable to the superintendent, or how the superintendent is accountable to us, we have to think about the fact that we can't hold the superintendent accountable if we were to do any of these things. And one of them, so like in one instance, the board will never give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent. So if I bypass Jean and go to Brenda and say, hey, I want something, I want a report that talks about all of the payroll for the last 10 years, and then something comes up about that normally we would hold her accountable for, all of a sudden, because we're not going through the superintendent and verifying that so that she can look at it first, then we're not holding her accountable because we have bypassed her. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Exactly. You've taken on the accountability versus her.
That's right.
Right.
So that's why when I look at this, we have to remember that in order to hold this superintendent accountable, we have to make sure that we allow her to do her job and that we don't try to do her job for her.
But the question becomes is, under statute, is the superintendent's responsible for boards, and making a distinction between the supervisory union and this board, I would think that things would work well enough if Gene continued to be Gene in terms of cooperating with everybody.
Sure.
And we're not hearing grievances, we're not hearing big noises that we don't want to hear. But if we don't listen to those noises, or say that they're not there, then that's a piece of our responsibility.
Okay. So, but I think that this policy specifically talks about how we hold the superintendent accountable.
No, it basically does the opposite. Read the three indicators again.
Well, so the first one is the board will never give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent.
Okay,
Okay? So that would be going to Brenda or to Melinda or someone else,
Okay.
asking them to do information.
okay.
The second one is the board will not evaluate either formally or informally any staff other than the superintendent. Again, probably makes some sense because we haven't done that in the past anyway. And the board will view successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by organizational accomplishment of board stated ends and avoidance of board prescribed means.
I'm not gonna make a big issue out of it. If nobody is concerned, then let's let it be.
Well, I don't want to pass something just because we don't want to make waves. I mean, we want to make sure that this is what we want it to say.
I agree with Bill.
Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, it's just you say it's like say you have a student here on campus and you got wind that there might be drugs in the locker. You ask someone to go check the locker, or you check it yourself. You don't ask the student to check their own locker. What are they going to say? Oh, it's all clean. Good.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, I think, you just put some of his thoughts in sort of in an interesting scenario, but I understand both of what you're saying. I guess I have the same concerns Bill has. I don't think that, I don't know how to write it, but it is hard to just rely, like we can't listen to anything else to give us an idea of what the district is like. We have to kind of ignore all of that.
I don't think that's what this is saying. I think this is just specifically telling you the three things you can't do. Which
I understand those first two.
Okay.
But yeah, the holding accountable. So the last one, say it again, it was about.
The board will view successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by organizational accomplishment of board stated ends and avoidance of board prescribed means.
Yeah, I mean, I get that we're in ends, but the means do matter sometimes. And for us to not evaluate means ever, I'm uncomfortable with. Because there could be in a scenario very kind of questionable means with a very good end in line, but we can't just. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just saying I don't want to close myself off from never being able to look at means ever. I'm not saying there is anything like that now. I could imagine there could be somebody at the helm that the means might be something very questionable.
Sure.
And then they'd be able to be like, oh, don't look at the means.
Well, okay, go ahead, Jean.
I don't see that it says that. It says avoidance of board prescribed means, meaning that the board is not
Oh,
going to
okay.
come in and say, Jean, this happened to
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
this
yeah.
is real life. Jean, I need you to hire that English teacher back that we just let go in the ref process, and instead I want you to fire this PE teacher. That would be board
Yeah,
prescribed
that sounds
means.
micromanaging.
Yeah, micromanaging is really what it means.
But to look at the means, you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Okay. But I do understand Bill's hesitancy, and it is.
Well, I think when we're
it's-
talking about.
It's not, Yeah.
I think this whole thing's about micromanaging.
Well, and when we're talking about means, I mean, as far as the way she goes about doing things, that, we're evaluating that through your monitoring reports, are we not? I mean, in order for her to state compliance, she has to show the evidence, and so she would have to explain how she got there, and that, those are the means. And I think if we were to start hearing rumblings like you're talking about, Bill, that might give us reason to reconsider our choice, which I wouldn't. But anyway, in any superintendent, then we have to adhere to that stuff. Then we should have a policy or something in place to just talk about that.
Your other policies speak to those means, so you have built a box around what I can do. So for example, if I wanted to go in and make, I don't know, Neshabie School all multi-age right now, you have a policy that says I can't make that kind of big decision without going out to the community and getting input. So, you know, if you found that the superintendent dictatorially makes a decision that significantly impacts the learning of students, your policy already says, without reaching out and doing input, I can't do that, and then you'd hold me accountable because I did that.
Excuse me, Natalie has her hand raised.
Thank you.
Hard to see, thank you. Oh.
I have a question about number 2. Would there ever be a time where the board would have to evaluate a staff member? Let's say the superintendent is indisposed or something happens. Does this not allow us to step in at such time that we have to?
Correct.
Or there-
You have, there's a succession policy that if the superintendent is indisposed, then who does step in. However, if you have concerns with the superintendent, you step in and evaluate the superintendent. You do that ongoing anyway.
As far as
Then
the,
should it say except as otherwise allowed in these policies?
I don't think, well, I think it's stated in other policies, so that's where, I mean, we know the succession plan, it does go to Kristen as your second lieutenant, right? Sorry.
I'm just being nitpicky lawyerly here, but I just feel like that would conflict because it doesn't allow you to do it somewhere else, so.
So you can't do it to other staff members either because we are a quasi-judicial board, as you know. So if there was ever an issue with a staff member and they wanted to come to the board, then we could not have already given them any kind of review or anything of our own, because then we would not be able to look at it again. We'd have to, right, we wouldn't be impartial, we'd have to recuse ourselves.
What happens if the superintendent, say, gets in a fist fight with another staff member, or someone feels that the superintendent has a personal vendetta against them and wants to make that known?
They can come and tell you, and you can choose to investigate the situation because the superintendent's involved. But if Jim Avery and a staff member get in a fist fight, you tell me to investigate unless I have already begun it.
So does that help in any of this particular policy, how this all works and what exactly it says?
Well, the bigger issue that I'm thinking of is that this is a public school, which is publicly governed by publicly elected people, which is us. And we delegate certain powers to the administration in order to do these kinds of things. And if there is a dispute with a faculty member or a staff member, they have appeals procedures through the superintendent up to the board. And it works both kinds of ways, is that the public tells us things and they expect us to be able to do things to run the school. And we have a responsibility to do it responsibly. And so that's the biggest thing that I think about, is that do we have clear lines of communication? Do we have clear lines of authority to do things? And this language bothers me some.
Well, I think we've put ourselves into a box, and that box is called policy governance. Once we made the decision to set things up the way it's been set up, and don't say we, once the previous board made that decision, we put ourselves in this box. I personally would love to see this board have much more input in the hiring of the high school principal. I'd like to see us vote on which candidate we hire. But, we're in a position now where we're passive observers of the whole process. And this policy is just kind of a formalization of what's already been done. The problem isn't these three criteria. The problem is that the board has abdicated its power and its responsibility. And I'm going to say that all the time when these come up. I know some people are tired of hearing it, but, like Cato the Elder, I got to give the message over and over. We gave up our power, and this is a consequence of that. We're looking at a symptom rather than a cause with this policy.
Greg?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle on this whole thing, just because I don't want us to go in the direction of what was previous before policy governance, but I'm also not completely comfortable with policy governance. So I really like the way Bill phrased it, that we're a public school, we're publicly elected. I know there's lots of different boards that I know about, whether it's the Unitarian Church I'm a part of, which is policy governance, or the Vermont Land Trust, which I have connections to, it's policy governance. These make more sense that it's completely policy governance, but those are boards that are privately sort of run. And so the public part is what makes me uncomfortable, of being too far in fully with the policy governance. I really do think we need to leave some more control in our hands. I think there is a way to be there. I don't think we have to be all in. I think we're going to turn off the public, honestly, and I hear it all the time from the public. So I don't want us to go away from policy governance completely, but I don't want us to go so far in that the public gets so upset and then we're back where we started. So I would love to find a balance.
Derek?
I think the balance comes in doing the work of monitoring, because that's the mechanism that's built into policy governance, is requiring the monitoring reports come to us, and it's our job to evaluate the fidelity of what's being stated versus what's out there for expectations, and that's hard. It's a new way of thinking and learning about the roles and responsibilities that the superintendent has and that we have. So I think it's there, and I think it's what we're getting better at as we go through the process of seeing the monitoring reports and seeing the evidence, and then we can get at the accountability piece if we're paying attention.
I understand what you're saying. I just disagree. I just don't think that that's enough.
You don't think that's enough?
No, I don't think it is, and I haven't seen evidence of it. I think we're missing a little bit of something. I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough to put my hands on it and tell you what it is. I think somebody very intelligent created policy governance. Somebody very intelligent created all sorts of concepts of boards. I'm just saying, I think because we're a public school, like Bill said, and we're publicly elected, I think it's a slightly different model that needs to be. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I don't think that's it. I don't think that's what the public wants. It's definitely not intuitively what I feel comfortable with.
Right.
It just does not satisfy what I feel like is our responsibility.
As you hold those thoughts, as time goes on, it would be helpful to articulate what changes in policy we might be able to make to satisfy that.
Well, Kevin
think
brought
it-
up a great example of the hiring of the principal. It's a great example.
I do ask for input.
I think, Derek, that public policy governance is very clearly based on a private model. The literature we got, the first day when we show up for the training, and we got a couple of handbooks. It's designed for corporations. And the purpose of it is to say to a CEO, go out and make our stock more valuable, go out and make money, and then report to us at the end of the quarter, and we'll let you know if we're happy with you. I don't think a public board can operate in that way. And I'll give you an example from tonight that we have these reports from the superintendent, and we look at them and we say, okay, no one's, there hasn't been any unrest with the staff and faculty, so we're in compliance, great. The problem with that is that it's set to a calendar, and these things come up, once a year. And so between now and a year from now, we've given ourselves permission not to think about the staff and whether it's happy or not.
That's not true.
No, I don't
I think we have.
Anytime.
I think it's innate in the process, Lori. I'm not saying that we're bad people, or that we're lazy, or that we don't care about others. I'm saying that the process has created a system in which that's gonna probably happen.
If we thought something was going on with staff, we could ask her to do this at any given time.
Well, what I'm saying is that we should be able to talk about anything at any given time,
We can.
because that's our job. Well, I'm not finding that to be the case. I think for example, we had a meeting that was shut down by the chair last year when something very important was being discussed. We have this schedule on every meeting.
Can we bring it back to
Point-
the,
Point of
See,
order.
there we go.
can we
So-
bring it back to the, go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I don't think that bringing it to point of order is a policy governance thing. That's a Robert's Rules of Order. That would be relevant in any discussion. So I'd like to make that point clear, that we have a topic that's on the table, and the topic on the table isn't certain things that are being brought up. So, and there's a couple of things that feel like they need a little clarification, such as Jean has asked for people to participate in the hiring of the principal. So that is not a closed system. And that's important because it's been raised. Policy governance is not solely for corporations. It's used in it's used in a lot of nonprofit organizations. So it is not purely a corporate model at all. And it is in fact used in school districts. One of the people at one of the trainings I attended was working with I believe, the entire state of Texas, if I'm not mistaken, and their public school system. So we are not standalone in using this model. I can appreciate that folks who haven't been through a dynamic training, might find this a cumbersome process. Because it is a cumbersome process, for sure. And I don't even claim to understand it, and I've been more or less in it for 4 years. But that doesn't mean it's garbage. It just means we have a lot to learn, but it does take a lot of the micromanaging aspects out of it, and when this discussion comes up, it does sort of seem like there's elements of wanting to be micromanaging again. And that is not a productive board. That isn't our job, it's not our role, and policy governance helps keep us in our lane. And I think that's of value. But not to discount what Bill and Greg have mentioned as some of the discomforts you have. I feel like maybe you know, maybe talking about like how we can reach a greater sense of, I don't know, comfort with it rather than to suggest abandoning it. Because I think it can be, we may just not have reached our comfort level with it, and we need to get there for sure. If everybody's feeling uncomfortable with it, that would, or even if not, if a bunch of people are feeling uncomfortable with it as a model, then we have work to do for sure. Yeah.
Excuse me, there are a couple of people online with their hands raised.
Oh, I didn't.
Charlie Angela, right?
Somebody else is first, that's
Angela,
fine.
It's up to you whether or not you allow Becky to go first.
Oh, Becky, go.
You can unmute yourselves now.
I have so many thoughts. So one is that I actually recently, without getting into the weeds, had people come to me and I sent that information to the appropriate channels, which was Jean, because it was something that Jean needed to handle. So people are reaching out. I think the way we represent ourselves and how if we are showing doubt and that we're not sure what we're doing, then that's how the town and the community is going to perceive us. If we are showing that, you know, we are, we have an understanding of this and we're not constantly fighting about it, that's going to show the community a different thing. And the other thing I want to say is when we constantly are questioning things, I can't help but think that policy governance is really about us hiring somebody that we trust can run the school. And if we are always saying we don't like this, are we always saying we don't trust Jean? Because that's probably how she's feeling every time we argue about it.
Greg?
So I'm sorry if I was interpreted to that extreme. That's not at all what I'm saying. I definitely don't want to go back and just because we talk about it, I just want to be clear. It's not so binary. It's not that I'm all for it or all against it or even slightly against it or for it. I just want to have a conversation about making it comfortable for our district. And I do believe that the transition into it, we need to be all comfortable about how we do it and then to help convince the community so they're passionate about it too. I want to keep policy governance. I want to make that clear. And I just don't want to be labeled, micromanaging. We're micromanaging again. Anytime we talk about it, that's not what I'm saying. I just want to simply have it work so that the community has been slowly brought along into it with us, that they still feel connected to us. And I do strongly feel like because we're a publicly elected people are electing us for a reason. And so I just want to make that clear. It's definitely not about Jean at all. This is about how we run our board. I just want to make that clear, so.
Natalie still has her hand raised as well.
Natalie, go ahead.
I think Barbara and Becky said a lot of what I wanted to say, but I do just want to add that as a board, we don't have time to micromanage Jean. That's why we have Jean, number one. And policy governance is not static. It is for us to constantly review and evaluate and make better. So that's what we're doing right now, reviewing 3.2. How can we make this better? So we just need to go at it from that perspective. These three, point don't have to stay the way they are. We can make them better. We can make them whatever we think they should be. And that's what we should be focusing on, and not whether policy governance is bad or good. We have it. Let's just do what we can to make the best that it can be.
Well said.
I'll make this really quick. To me, the problem isn't staying in the lane. The problem is that the lane is getting narrower and narrower as we go along, and I think policy governance forces us into that position. And then the other thing is that, Becky, I think we have to trust Jean's professionalism that we certainly can't edit ourselves because we're afraid of somebody's feelings getting hurt, and I don't think it's a problem anyway. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Well, I think it's been a good discussion. And it does fall under the criteria of reflecting on these kinds of things. I don't see anything in the statute that would say we can't do policy governance. I mean, everything here is according to what the law says. Again, it's that balance of things in terms of what's the board's role. I think we need to continue to reflect on that.
So in regards to 3.2, do you want to do anything with this, or do you want to wait until next month and talk about it again?
I don't need to talk about
What's
it.
They're just accepted.
Well, all I need to know is if you want to accept it, if there's any evidence, we have to do something with it. We've never looked at this one before.
Although we looked at it and we just didn't, we didn't understand the title at first.
Right.
And so the question is, are we, are we comfortable with the title?
Are you comfortable with these? If we are, how have we shown that we've done this or not done this? Which I think we've shown that we haven't done it, because I'm not aware of anybody going behind Jean's back to get any information. We haven't done any kind of review on any staff member as a board, and we're allowing Jean to do her job by not micromanaging her and by not whatever.
I guess I still don't know how that's holding her accountable, but.
Because she's accountable for her own actions.
No, I understand all that. I just meant if this is called how we're holding her accountable, maybe we're missing another part. I don't know.
Sure, go ahead.
The way I see it is this policy talks about what the board's, as Kevin said, lane is, and that in order to hold the superintendent accountable, if the board interferes by giving instructions to staff, by evaluating staff, by coming up with a whole new way of viewing successful performance that isn't actually something they prescribe, then the board can't hold the superintendent accountable. So it's not about how you're going to do that. That's under evaluation of
Okay,
superintendent.
that's what I kind of wanted to, maybe that is, so it's
Yeah.
not evaluating.
And I think the
Okay.
difficulty is the way this thing is worded, the way all of policy governance is worded is what you're living within, and it's it's hard to take one policy out of the context of all, but that's what this particular piece is saying, is that if you're going to hold, and I have been in a situation where a board has a hiring committee and hires somebody and then tells me that I need to, that it was the wrong hire, and I'd be accountable for that hire when I didn't hire them. Same with the principal search. I had asked when I put out the process, would the board like to do another process? And there was no redirection of that process. But if the board were to hire the principal, which I don't have time, you're welcome to do it. But anyway, if the board wanted to hire the principal, then I would still be supervising the principal, but I couldn't be held accountable for that hire if that principal turned out to be Jack the Ripper.
Well, and I think the way you hired Vicki Wells over at Neshabie worked very well. We got to see, if you wanted, all of the board members got to watch the video or be part of the Zoom with each of the 3 candidates and ask questions, and then we got to give our feedback to Jean afterward. And I think that worked very well, and I suspect that that's the same kind of process you're going to do with
Right,
Mr.
it is.
Avery and Mr. Lawrence.
The board by law does the hiring of principals with the advice of the superintendent. So it still has that role in there.
And it does. It comes to the board. And the
Right.
board's been a part of the process all along, as they wish to be.
And it looks like it's a broad process, and that's how it should be.
So, back to 3.2.
I'd like to support the policy. Is it time to vote on this?
Well, I haven't put anything into the, I think we figured out the what does it mean. And I guess I already gave examples when I talked about it before. So if you're okay with the examples I gave and the interpretations, yes, we can go ahead and vote if you're ready to do that.
Do we have to do anything?
Only if you feel that there's something wrong with the policy or that you want to change it in any way.
I think it should be examined, but I don't think that's something I want to do tonight.
I would love to hear from other people. Are you ready to vote? I'm only hearing from two of you.
Well, yes.
Oh, we actually, but isn't this already our policy?
Yes,
So
but
why
I
do
need
we-
to know whether or not you accept.
Oh, that we
the
accept
policy
it.
stated, or if you want to change it in any way. So more or less what I've said is it wants to know our reasonable interpretation. And the first one says the board will never give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent, which means that we don't go behind Jean's back or the superintendent's to other staff members. And examples of where we did or didn't do this, as far as I know, nobody has gone beyond Jean without asking Jean first for any kind of information. The board will not evaluate either formally or informally any staff other than the superintendent, meaning that the only person we will evaluate is Jean and no one else. And we have not done that, where we've done exactly what that says. And as far as the third one goes, the board will view successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by organizational accomplishment of board stated ends, which are all of our monitoring reports, our 2-point whatevers, and the avoidance of board prescribed means, meaning that we haven't told her how to go about doing anything. And we haven't done that either. So if you agree with all of that, we can vote.
Does 2 mean that, how does that account for process of appeals if,
Appeals from who?
say Gene fires someone and they think it's an unfair?
So that's not that is not what this says. So if that's where we are the quasi-judicial board. So if we were to go and evaluate them and then they wanted to appeal that, we could not listen to them because we have already, we have gone behind Jean's back, and that's not the right way to say it. We have.
Our impartiality would be compromised?
Thank you, there we go. And, this says that the only person we will evaluate is Jean. So if Jean does fire someone and they grieve it, they can come to the board and we can listen to them as a quasi-judicial board because we did not have any say in their hiring or firing. And we can listen to what they have to say. Does that answer your question?
The board would have hiring and firing authority under a 1752 appeal.
Mm-hmm. But we could listen, they could come and grieve it and we
They
could.
would have, we'd have to listen to it.
Right. Is that okay? So, we ready to vote now? All those in favor, or all those in favor of accepting 3.2, signify by saying aye.
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 Who made the motion?
In the beginning, they were made, I believe, weren't they? I hope
I
so.
don't know
Yeah,
if we have a motion.
You don't actually need a motion to
Oh.
accept this. You
Yeah,
can just kind
there
of,
was no
it's a work
motion at the
plan.
beginning.
So we can do it by
If you're gonna
consensus.
change it, then you need
Yeah,
to move to
'cause
change it.
we already
Okay.
have it.
If
All
you
right.
you just
So-
reviewed it, so that's all you need to
Okay.
do.
Because of the time, I'm going to say we're going to pass 3.3 at this point, so we can do everything else. If we have time, we'll come back to it. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, board member recruitment. So as you know, and in your board packet, there were, who's up for re-election in March. And so I know Bonnie wanted to let everyone know that you are not going to rerun for your position, and we're sorry to hear that you need to leave, but we're hoping you'll come back. Or maybe you'll change your mind between now and January. So, so that means that we will need a new Pittsford rep. Angela, who's on the call, also has said that she will be leaving her position, which means that we will be looking for a new Leicester representative. Her position was not actually up for re-election this year, so someone would be filling out the rest of her term. I think there's 1 year left, and Angela, if I'm mistaken, you can correct me.
Yes, actually, there might be 2 years.
Okay.
I'm not sure when I ran. It's either 1 or 2.
Okay.
So will that person run, or do we appoint?
No, that person will run because we know well in advance, but they would only run until the end of her next. So that may only be a 2-year seat or a 1-year seat, depending on when she ran last. And then she would run it, they could run again for the next 3-year term. The other people up for election, as far as I know, is Barbara, myself, Barry, Barry, because he needs to, right, he was appointed, so if he wants to continue, he'll need to run. Derek is up for re-election for his Brandon seat. Anybody else that I'm missing? So if you're thinking of not running or whatever, please let us know sooner rather than later so that we can let the public know, so that if they're interested, that they can come to an onboarding session with Jean and myself, or to get more information, or to just, think about it. So, okay? All right.
Bill wanted to talk elections.
Oh, right, you wanted to talk elections too, so I apologize. What did you want to discuss?
This is basically the selectmen.
Oh, right. So, if anybody read last week's paper in the Reporter, it looked like the Brandon Select Board had decided that they were going to send out school ballots this year, and that is not, they don't have the authority to determine that. So the question becomes whether or not we should let them know that, and I want to know if we want to pick that battle.
We're also, and maybe you found out when you talked to the secretary, we're not even sure that you're allowed to mail out all ballots this year like last year. That was a 1-year waiver of the law. So we don't know if their decision, even so we're researching that right now.
So if you would like me to reach out to Seth Hopkins and just remind him that 2 years ago when I spoke to him about the board wanting to go and visit the select board every once in a while, let them know what they were doing, and he specifically said, nope, we don't, we need to keep that stuff separate. Maybe I need to remind him that we need to keep that stuff separate.
I didn't read the article. Did they just make a mistake, or?
I don't think
No,
so.
they vote, it looked like they voted for
That's not
that.
what their intent was.
I didn't think so,
No.
but,
Oh, the
No,
way,
they were going to reach out to the district to see if you wanted to do that, to save money, if ballots were going to be
Okay.
mailed out. But Dave Atherton made it clear that, all districts would have to agree to that, which means, I guess, all towns would have to mail. But no, they were not saying that they were going to.
Well, if I can correct that even a little bit too. Last year, when the state allowed it, and this board agreed to mail out, the school board, decides what happens to the school ballot. The towns decide what happens to the town ballot, which causes some problems if a Goshen doesn't want to mail their ballot. You can't choose, you can't say we're only going to mail for Brandon. You're either mailing or you're not mailing, if it's allowed this year, and we're checking to see if it's allowed. And we'll bring it to you as a question. That upset a couple of our smaller towns last year who did not want to mail. And they didn't have to, but it upset them anyway because it split the election. So when you make that decision, like we had the discussion last year, you have to make that decision realizing the potential impact in some towns of response. Same thing in reverse. If Brandon is allowed to mail out their ballots and this board decides no, then the election will be run in person, just the Australian ballot, just for the school district. And so that could have an impact on the voters who show up. It gets complicated as a school district that covers 8, well, in your case, 6 towns, because those 6 towns are not going to agree. But you get to make one decision for the 6 towns. So we'll be bringing that information to you if there's anything to bring.
And the town actually made 2 motions, which I don't know if we'll put it in the paper. One being that the town would mail their ballots, but then the other motion would be they would mail the school ballots if all districts agreed to do so. But Dave Atherton made it quite clear that all towns had to agree to do that before they would be able to mail the school ballots.
Which also isn't accurate, though. That's what I mean. We can choose, we decide the school ballots, not the towns. So we could mail, we could say, yes, we're going to mail, and Goshen says, we're not. We're holding it in person. And then there's just simply 2 different ways of voting on the 2 different things.
Actually, the Secretary of State's office said something very similar to what Charlene is saying, is that all 6 or all the towns, member districts have to go the same way. And if the town went to a mail-in ballot and we had a show up to vote kind of thing, what would that do to the turnout in the direction of the election? I don't think it would be good.
Okay. So are we all set with that?
Yeah, I would suggest that a quiet conversation
Okay.
occur about the propriety and so forth.
All right. Okay. Hawk Hill update and annual report. The Hawk Hill management plan.
Hey, I'm up.
You are.
On your, I handed out these things, which show, it's a brochure that we collaborated with the Brandon Greenways on walking trails, and one of the results was this fold-out feature map of walking
I have
trails.
a pile of them at the, well, okay, I'll take them, but I have some at the store.
Good.
Because Bill Powers just paid me a visit today, so.
Just getting this information out to folks. These have been distributed to all the elementary schools for the faculty. We're hoping to do a presentation, the Hawk Hill Committee was hoping to do a presentation to the faculty at Otter Valley to address some of the hunting issues and some of the potential, and have the Moose Lamoose students participate in that as well. But the in-service training times are really tight, and folks are stressed, and so I'm not sure whether that's going to happen this year or not, and only want it to happen if it's going to be beneficial and help reduce stress, like take a walk on the Hawk Hill trails. Would be a wonderful thing to do.
They do that a lot in PE.
Mm-hmm.
They walk the trails.
Yeah, it's used a lot. I'm not going to go over everything. There is a report. There's a brief report in the minutes or in the supplemental documents about some of the things that have happened in the past year or so. The management plan is something that you need to approve revisions of periodically. So that's also included in there. And part of the management plan includes a policy, a hunting policy. And we have recommended some language change in that hunting policy. So you can't approve the management plan until you approve the changes in the hunting policy. So I'd like this meeting to be the first reading of that policy, so that at the next meeting we can go ahead and approve the management plan revisions or updates. And it's just it's not a big deal, it's some minor clarification language, and, but it is in policy, so we have to kind of go through that process, I believe.
Question.
Yep.
Are you actually suggesting the sentence about with Bud Snow's name go actually in the policy, or is that just information for us?
That's information.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead, Natalie.
I was gonna point that out, that we should put somebody's name in there.
Sure.
The other comment I had is, who revokes a hunting permit? It says, number 16, a hunting permit may be revoked at any time. Do we have does the committee have the authority to do that?
Yes, we have, Bud Snow is currently the sportsman representation member, and people who want to hunt get permission. They get a permit from him to hunt on Hawk Hill property, and if they don't abide by, certain requirements that are spelled out there, then those permit could be revoked by Bud.
We delegated
So
their
it's a permit
requirement.
to use the land.
Pardon me?
It's a permit to
It's
hunt.
a permit to use the hunt on the land.
The permit is for hunting on the Hawk Hill Conservation property. Yes,
The
Bill.
board delegated Bud to do that, as I recall.
yes.
Eric, one problem we had in the past with Hawk Hill is that when it was originally set up, it delegated, it had requirements in it for representation from the Sportsman's Club, the Historical Society, and a couple of other groups. And the Sportsman's Club and the Historical Society no longer exist, but we still have required by the land trust, I believe, that these hunting requirements and so forth. Bud's been doing this for a long time. I don't know how much longer he's planning to do it. Does the Hawk Hill Committee have a plan in place for what's gonna happen next? And same thing with Bill Powers. He's gonna reach a point, so, in the relatively near future where he probably doesn't wanna do this anymore. What's the plan for
Sure.
replacing these?
Well, one of the revisions that we did do was bylaws. We developed some bylaws for the Hawk Hill Committee that include articulating the positions of the committee, which is a historian, a sportsman, some at-large people, that kind of thing. So, in the event that turns over, the board can appoint those positions to be filled by, competent people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Derek?
You mentioned first reading, the important thing is notifying the public 10 days or something like that. There's a procedure for adopting a policy.
And it is a policy. He's bringing the changes forward for first reading for change to the policy. Then we have to have 30 days between the first and second reading. So there is the appropriate notification of that process. So it comes back
It'll come back to us.
to the December board meeting if it's 30 days from today.
That would be
So
fine.
the old policy is in effect currently,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Derek?
I just want to say thank you. Hawk Hill Committee is a burden, and there's only one school board member on it. I was that member many years ago, and I found it a really hard job. So I want to say thanks to Derek. Sounds like you guys are on top of things, and kudos to you for that.
Yeah, read the report. There's been a lot of interesting things, connections to the community, and some future ongoing stuff, hopefully, as well. So,
Nice report.
Thank you. So, did we get a first or second on this policy? Did we ask? I don't think we did. did
Derek
we?
clearly makes a motion. I think
Right, are
That's
you
what he
making the
did when he
motion?
brought it forward.
Yeah.
Okay, did someone second it?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. That's your first reading.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, OVUU board policies for action. Hawk Hill hunting, oh no, we just did that. Sorry. So not paying attention. Review board annual work plan. Anything on here that we need to?
No, did you want to
Update?
talk about the facilities meeting?
That's true. So our next meeting for the work plan is November 17th at Neshabie. We will be talking about facilities like we did 2 weeks ago. However, we hardly had a quorum. We just barely had 7 people there. And so, and there was a lot of discussion. We had 2 or 3 different presentations. So it's very important that if you were not there for that meeting, please watch either the Zoom link or the PEG TV that was done, because all of that information is going to lead into our discussions next in 2 weeks, and we're not going to rehash it all. So come with your questions, come with your whatever, but this will allow us a good at least hour and a half or longer to really get into the discussion that we started to have and then ran out of time. Okay? Okay. Superintendent's report.
You have the written report. I'm hoping that some of you have signed up for the VSBA conference, which is tomorrow afternoon and Friday. Tomorrow afternoon is Dr. Lubell Brown giving a keynote, the superintendent of Ithaca School District, who is doing more and more work in the state of Vermont. And he wrote the book Culture of Love, which fits right in with another topic that I'd like to talk about. I was able to go visit Ithaca a couple weeks ago with some other school districts, and I took Susanna White, our equity coordinator, with me, and see, firsthand kind of how things have turned around under Dr. Brown. Fascinating speaker. I don't know the Friday morning person. I haven't yet heard her. There is a VSBA board meeting Friday morning, and your resolution, I believe, is on the docket for that approval.
Should be on Thursday night, should it not tomorrow night, or is it Friday morning?
I believe it's Friday morning at 8:15. Is that not correct? Somebody's
think-
Friday morning at 8:15.
I think that is true and correct, because I got an email.
Yes. The principal process, since that came up earlier, the thought exchange just closed. We had a great amount of input from parents and staff and students, which is wonderful. That input is being funneled into the writing of the ad, but not all of it can go in the ad. We want this person who walks on water forwards and backwards and upside down. We do want that, but we don't want an ad that's going to scare off anybody from applying either. So some of the information goes into the questions that we ask the candidate. Some of the information goes into the information we provide our final candidates about, this is what the community sees the school is needing. So that was a good process. That ad should be out. I had hoped for Friday. Still might make Friday. But if not Friday, then very, very soon, maybe Monday. And I'd like the ad to run through Thanksgiving vacation and probably stop right after. And the reason I do that, having done principal searches for many years, especially this year, a candidate who's currently a sitting principal somewhere needs that opportunity to step back and think about it. In fact, I called you for this job over April vacation. You need that chance to step back and take a pause and say, do I want to do this? So we'll close it right after. Also, in the next week or so, I'll be pulling together the search advisory committee that helps to review the resumes and acts as the ambassador for the candidates. And at that time, I'll be setting the dates, and you'll know way in advance what the dates are for when the candidates come to the school. Ideally, I'd like them to spend time at the school. There'd be a forum after school for staff, forum in the evening for board members and parents to participate in, so that you have, and that will I haven't decided about the live part, but the virtual part will be available because what I found is the virtual drew in a whole lot more people than when it was live. 12 people live versus 50 people online makes a huge difference, makes it accessible. The hope, and so that 2 weeks, those really busy budget for me, 2 weeks in late November, early December is when I'd like to hold interviews. And then that ideally, if super lucky, means that a candidate would come to the board by Christmas vacation. Or if we determine it's a failed search, we're primed and ready to go back out at Christmas vacation to do the January cycle. Generally, there are cycles of a late fall, a January, a March, and hopefully not a June. Are kind of the cycles of when people are looking for jobs. So that's where we are in that process. An update on behaviors and a soapbox that I will try not to climb, but I probably will find myself doing it anyway. We do have significant behavior issues, particularly at the high school still. Personally, I'm more concerned about behavioral issues than I am the elementary. Yes, a child at elementary school may act out physically, but that's more understandable than if a child at the high school acts out physically. Because, I mean, think about if you're a parent of your own little kids and how they learn those coping skills and how to control their own behavior. Also, at the elementary school, I'm very aware that last year, our K-5 kids last year had 4 days of structured school. This current 7th grade class left a structured school setting in March of their 5th grade. Their 6th grade was hybrid, and then all, 7 through 12, everybody else was hybrid. And in a sense, we're asking kids who got used to not being around people and not having to follow a structure, who could take classes from their bed if they wished to, use their phone whenever they wanted, get food and water whenever they wanted, play Xbox whenever they wanted. Sorry, I'm a mother of a 14-year-old. Now it's like, oh, remember, you have to come back and this is what time you're going to have lunch, and you're going to be in this class for 80 minutes, and it's almost like reteaching in a sense. In addition, when there are behavior problems, and this was part of my interview with Angelo this week, I haven't seen the paper yet, but behavior problems predated COVID. Behavior problems have been from the beginning of time. Before this year, before COVID though, we had structures in place to respond to those behavior problems and to help teach the kids coping skills or hold accountable for the behaviors. In my view, the kids are struggling and our systems are broken. We don't have the staff to maintain the systems that we put in place. We have principals subbing in classrooms. We have a custodian subbing in a classroom. The support staff is subbing in classrooms. We don't have we aren't able to maintain the systems. They're not wrong systems, we just don't have the staffing to maintain them. Today entered the second quarter at Otter Valley, and I think somebody described to me in the last couple of days, this has been the longest year ever, and we're entering the second quarter. Staff are exhausted. At Otter Valley, there's a lot of staff covering for staff, and thank goodness we negotiated that in the contract so we could pay them to do that. But what happens is when a teacher is covering for another teacher, and that therefore doesn't give them the time to do the things they need to do, they get tired and eventually have to take a day off almost to catch up. And so that causes a cycle of we're always out. We reached a tipping point, I believe, this week on Monday at the high school, where we had 15% of the staff out, and where we could not find coverage, we sent the kids either here to the library to be supervised by our substitute librarian, Susan Hennessy, because Stephanie was even out that day, or to the cafeteria to be supervised by 1 or 2 people. Supervised is not the same as being taught. They were sent to be supervised. One student said that he was in 3 of those opportunities. I had a conversation with Jim today, and I would like us to consider at the high school, what is the tipping point by which we know the day before? Because we also get phone calls the next morning. You know, you might have 4 people out as of 5 o'clock the afternoon and 7 more people call in the next morning. So what is that tipping point? It's probably somewhere around 10% of staff, at which we say tomorrow's going to be a virtual day. Staff come in, kids, log on to your classes. We would rather have the teachers teaching virtually than the kids not having a teacher. Does that make sense? And we think that at the middle school and high school we can do that if it's noticed the day in advance. So we're having those discussions right now. Jim wants to talk with faculty. We continue to seek permanent subs. We increase the substitute pay by another $1 an hour, which is still below the general dollar store and restaurants. But trying to entice people. One shining light is that we actually hired another nurse to help our nurses as we try to implement test to stay and the surveillance testing and all of those, and contact tracing. We actually had 3 candidates come forward who were great candidates and offered the position to one who accepted it. But the infrastructure staffing is very, very difficult. The elementary schools are struggling, particularly Neshabie as the largest, actually, and Leicester as the smallest. But the elementary schools are managing better right now than the high school is, and it's all of those pieces together. The kids are in a different place than where they were. You know, my personal viewpoint is that COVID is going to cause an extreme change in the way education is done, and that's not a bad thing, but going through this transition hurts a lot. And that's of great concern to me and to all of us. My other point that I want to make there kind of goes to something that was said earlier and something that Kevin said a couple of meetings ago. We really do need to remember, as we're hearing about behaviors that none of us think are acceptable, we do need to remember that kids are kids. They don't come to us fully formed adults, supposed with the coping skills that we have. In talking to Angelo, he asked me a question. He said, "Do you really have 2 to 3 disruptive kids in every classroom?" And my response was, "Do you go to work every day at 100% of your capacity?" Of course we do. I mean, none of us are 100% on, but disruptive versus chronically disruptive versus emotionally disturbed are very different things. And we as adults learn some coping strategies when we're not at our best. Some of us better than others, but when we're not at our best, we have learned through life, and our kids haven't yet. So I ask for compassion, I ask for patience, I ask for understanding for the kids and the principals alike. And just wanted to bring you up to speed that it's an issue. Another step that the Otter Valley had to do, and we're still looking into what possibilities exist here, but rather than making phone calls to families when kids are missing a class, we're now sending out a robo email, and some parents have written upset about that. But again, we need the staff making the phone calls to be in with the kids. Bonnie?
Are you worried that we're going to lose additional staff when it's already tight with the vaccine?
A little, yes.
I mean, just because we're hurting for subs and whatever else, and I mean,
Right.
it applies to everyone.
Right. A little, yes. I will also say the associations came to us and asked for the vaccine mandate.
Right, and I realize that. I just, with the staffing being so tight.
And I
it's-
don't think it will be huge numbers, but numbers are numbers.
Well, yeah,
The
but
other interesting
one sub
thing.
counts at this point.
The other interesting thing is that we're not going to require the day-to-day subs to be vaccinated. We're not going to
Okay, that
limit
was-
ourselves that far. The permanent
It's
subs or the
permanent.
permanent employees who
Okay.
are in every day will be required. So if somebody, and we're allowing our employees who absolutely don't want to. and don't have a valid exemption, we're allowing them to ask for a leave of absence, and we would allow them to sub. It does change their benefits, but it
Oh,
would
they
not
could-
hurt their long-term.
Okay.
So.
I didn't realize I had read the leave of absence part, I didn't realize the
Yeah.
day-to-day sub
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah, because we didn't put it in there, but, yeah, it's
So-
just for employees and not the day-to-day. So that leaves us a little bit more flexible room. And, you know, if it's a mass exodus, I guess I'll have to revisit, but.
Well, I mean, do we have an idea of how many staff members aren't vaccinated that? I mean, do you have an idea going into it
We
that you have
don't
a
have-
percentage?
It's very interesting and frustrating. We were told that nurses were not allowed to look at the immunization registry, which would have made life very easy. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were told they could look at it for kids but not staff. So we asked the staff to self-report, and that didn't happen. So generally, we find out what staff is vaccinated when we contact trace, because if you're vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine and you don't have to use sick time. So then people will speak up. So no, I don't have a solid, but we have a pretty good idea.
You have an idea of what?
And because only 12 and up currently is vaccinated, I can tell you that at Otter Valley, it appears to be 53% of our student body is vaccinated. Otter Valley student body. Staff, if I were to estimate, I would put it in the 85% are vaccinated. And I've heard from 3 staff who are very upset about this. The mandate, we're barely ahead of what's coming down anyway from VOSHA, from Biden to
Right.
VOSHA to us.
Then my only other question, well, and you can redirect me if it's not meant for now, in that
Okay.
policy was there was something about, and maybe I misread it, on if they had to quarantine after they were vaccinated.
Yeah.
Why would they have to quarantine after they were vaccinated? That's where I got lost in that one, because I was like, well.
If they have symptoms.
If they have symptoms,
They
okay.
still have to quarantine.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't say that piece, and that's what I
Right.
was wondering if
Right.
it meant, but it's impossible to keep up with as fast as they're changing
Yeah.
what you have to quarantine or not
Yeah.
quarantine.
It's hopeful. We are going to hold 2 vaccination clinics. We don't get to choose the sites. The Department of Health chose the sites, and they chose Neshabie and Leicester, I think primarily because of the free and reduced lunch percentages in those schools. But any of our schools can go there. So like if you're a parent at Pittsford and you want to go to one of those, you can sign up and go. We're hopeful that we will get some, we won't, I also get the emails telling me to never ever speak, never ever to send them anything like this again, in not so polite terms. So we won't, but the more that we do get vaccinated, both staff and students, I think we'll see fewer of the classroom shutdowns and more stability as well, so that will help.
I have a question on that as well. Do you know what the tipping point will be for a class to stay in session versus going remote? Because, I mean, I'm thinking, if you have to wait for 50% of a.
Currently, to bring them back, we're asking for 50%. And the reason I set that rule is because I don't want the teacher teaching hybrid this year, where they're sitting in front of a computer with kids in front of them, like I'm doing right now. That's very, very difficult. And so if you had fewer than 50% of the kids in class, then why wouldn't you stay virtual? You know, if it's fewer than 50%. But if you have more than 50% in, then I think that's when it would come back. So I haven't fully thought it, but it might be along the same path. I mean, how many people are really impacted then? Positive cases will still happen, but how many close contacts are impacted by that will determine it. And the goal is to try to stay in session as much as possible.
Well, if we get the daily testing in, then hopefully.
Right, the test to stay will
two
help
things
greatly.
together.
Exactly, yeah.
This goes back to the junior high school. If there are days that we have to go remote, are you anticipating unhappiness with parents, if kids that age being home alone, or are we going to notify parents that this may be coming down the pike, or?
After Jim talks to his faculty and gets their input, we would notify parents before we do it that this may be coming down the pike. Middle schoolers were home last year. And it's a difficult call. I mean, home doing virtual or sitting in the cafeteria because they don't have a teacher for 2 or 3 classes. I think the safety issue is tremendous when we don't have enough staff to cover classes.
Any other questions for Jean?
Rest of the state in the same situation.
Pretty much, yes. Not pretty much, yes. This is not unique to us. I'm participating actually on a state level think tank about it. And so I shared our story, and another school counselor from a different district said their issue is the opposite. They're more concerned about their elementary kids than their high school kids. So that might change throughout the state, but everybody statewide is having significant concerns about behaviors, which is why you're seeing the headlines, and the headlines really bother me because they make the kids, they vilify the kids, I think, and that's not what we should be doing. More questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I've read half the article, and I have it here if you'd like it. But thank you. I mean, it's good. Thank you for taking the time. I think so, yeah. And
Yeah, the poor guy called and I said, let's talk. I think it was about 3 hours of talking.
kudos. It's hard to.
I tell you what you need to be writing about.
Okay, you want to talk about VSBA, Bill?
Oh, just briefly, is that the last date for hearings of the state board on the 2200 rules is for Friday. And so if the VSBA passes this resolution on Friday, then word has to get to Montpelier immediately.
Okay.
And Sue
Well, we will.
Siglowski would be the person that should be doing that, but we should probably follow it up, assuming that it's all positive in terms of the vote.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So the gentleman with the Boston Red Sox hat, did you want to address the board? Okay. Okay, so if there's nothing else that we need to speak of tonight, I say we adjourn, and someone make that motion. And second it. Okay, good night.